We all know the story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He formed Adam from the dust of the ground, breathed life into his nostrils, and later fashioned Eve from his rib to be his companion in the Garden of Eden. For centuries, this has been the foundational narrative of human origins for billions of people around the world. But what if I told you that hidden within the very first pages of the book of Genesis lies a profound mystery, a textual anomaly that has puzzled biblical scholars, theologians, and curious readers for thousands of years? What if Adam and Eve were not the first human beings on earth? What if, before the Garden of Eden even existed, God had already populated the world with an entirely different race of humans? And more importantly, what happens when we realize that the Bible itself might be leaving breadcrumbs pointing exactly to this shocking possibility? To understand this enigma, we have to look closely at a man who was utterly terrified of people who supposedly did not exist. We are going to explore the exile of Cain, the stark differences between the first two chapters of Genesis, and a controversial theory that might completely change how you read the oldest book in the world. Let us travel back to the dawn of creation and examine the text itself. If you read the book of Genesis carefully, you will notice something highly unusual right at the beginning. The Bible actually gives us two completely different creation accounts. The first account spans the entire first chapter and ends in the first few verses of chapter 2. In this grand cosmic perspective, God creates light, the oceans, the land, the plants, and the animals in a specific sequence over 6 days. Then, on the sixth day, the text says, God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blesses them and tells them to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it. Notice the language here. Mankind is created simultaneously, male and female, en masse. They are given the whole earth to populate. But then, starting in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, the narrative completely shifts. We are presented with what appears to be a second, much more intimate creation story. In this version, the earth is barren. There are no plants yet because it has not rained. And then, God forms a single man, Adam, from the dust of the ground. God plants a specific garden in Eden and puts the man there. Only later, after realizing it is not good for the man to be alone, does God create the animals to see what Adam will name them, and finally, God creates Eve. Do you see the contradiction? In chapter 1, animals are created before humans, and mankind is created male and female together to fill the earth. In chapter 2, Adam is created first, then the animals, and then Eve, and they are placed in a localized garden. For centuries, traditional scholars have argued that chapter 2 is simply a zoomed-in, detailed retelling of the events of the sixth day. But is it? Many linguists and ancient text researchers point out that the Hebrew words used in these two accounts are fundamentally different. In chapter 1, the word used for create is bara, implying a divine creation out of absolutely nothing. The creator is referred to exclusively as Elohim, a transcendent cosmic God. But in chapter 2, the word used to form Adam is yatsar, which means to mold or shape, like a potter working with clay. And suddenly, the creator is referred to as Yahweh Elohim, a more personal, relational Lord. This has led to a fascinating and controversial idea known as the Pre-Adamite Theory. What if Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 are not the same event? What if Genesis 1 describes the creation of a vast global human population, men and women created in God's image to populate the entire planet? And what if, sometime later, God initiated a new, specific project? He formed a special man, Adam, placed him in a protected sanctuary called Eden to begin a specific lineage that would eventually lead to the patriarchs, the nation of Israel, and the Messiah. If this theory holds any truth, it suddenly solves one of the most glaring, uncomfortable mysteries in the entire Bible, the mystery of Cain. Let us look at what happens after the fall of man. Adam and Eve are banished from the Garden of Eden. They have two sons, Cain and Abel. As the story goes, Cain becomes jealous of his brother because God favored Abel's offering. In a fit of rage, Cain commits the first murder in human history. God confronts Cain and pronounces a heavy curse upon him. He is driven away from the ground and condemned to be a restless wanderer on the earth. Now, pay very close attention to Cain's reaction. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 14, Cain cries out to God in absolute terror. He says, "Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." Wait, whoever finds me? According to the traditional Sunday school timeline, at this exact moment in history, the only living human beings on the entire planet are Adam, Eve, and Cain. Abel is dead. So, who exactly is Cain so afraid of? If he is the only child left to the only two people on earth, there is absolutely no one out there to find him, let alone kill him. Yet, Cain's fear is so real, so palpable, that God actually validates it. God does not tell Cain, "Do not be silly, there is no one else out there." Instead, God puts a physical mark on Cain to protect him, a divine warning sign so that no one who finds him will slay him. This exchange makes absolutely zero logical sense, unless the world outside of Adam and Eve's family was already populated, and the mystery only deepens as we follow Cain into his exile. The Bible tells us that Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. The very next verse casually states, "Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch." Cain then was building a city, and he named it after his son Enoch. These few sentences are mind-boggling when you truly analyze them. First, where did Cain get a wife? If Adam and Eve were the very first humans, the traditional explanation is that Cain must have married an unnamed sister. While the Bible does mention much later that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters, the text at the time of the murder implies the family was very small. But even if we accept that Cain married a sister, we run into an even bigger logistical nightmare. Cain builds a city. Think about what a city requires. It requires a population. It requires builders, tradesmen, an economy, a social structure. You do not build a city for yourself, your wife, and your newborn baby. A city implies the existence of a surrounding civilization. If the Pre-Adamite theory is correct, everything suddenly clicks into place perfectly. The people created in Genesis chapter 1, the men and women told to multiply and fill the earth, were already out there. They had been multiplying for an unknown amount of time while Adam and Eve were in the garden. When Cain was banished to the land of Nod, he was not walking into an empty wasteland. He was walking into a populated world. He was afraid of these other people, these outside tribes who might enact frontier justice upon a wandering murderer. He found his wife among them, and he recruited them, or conquered them, to help build the first city mentioned in biblical history. Of course, this theory is not without its heavy theological implications. If there were humans before Adam, what does that mean for the doctrine of original sin? The Apostle Paul writes in the New Testament that sin entered the world through one man, Adam, and death through sin. If humanity existed outside the garden, were they dying before Adam's fall? Did they have souls in the same way? Some theologians who support the pre-Adamite concept argue that Adam was not the first biological human, but the first spiritually awakened human, the first priest of humanity, chosen to bring the world into a perfect relationship with God. When Adam fell, his failure impacted the entire world, bringing a curse upon the whole created order, including those populations already living outside the garden. On the other hand, the traditional Orthodox view pushes back hard against this idea. Defenders of a literal single-pair origin point out that Genesis clearly states Eve was named so because she would become the mother of all the living. They argue that ancient texts often present a summary of an event before going back to give a detailed, chronological breakdown, which would explain the differences between chapter 1 and 2. They maintain that human lifespans before the flood were extraordinarily long, lasting hundreds of years. In that vast span of time, Adam and Eve could have had dozens of children, who then had children, creating a rapidly expanding population. By the time Cain is exiled, and by the time he builds his city, perhaps hundreds of years had passed since the murder of Abel, and the earth was already teeming with his own relatives. It is a debate that pits biological and historical logic against long-standing theological doctrine. But regardless of which side you lean toward, the presence of these textual clues forces us to read the Bible with a deeper, more investigative lens. The text does not shy away from leaving us with massive, unanswered questions. It drops us into a world where mysterious figures appear out of nowhere, where ancient cities are built in exiled lands, and where a marked man wanders into the east, terrified of shadows that the narrative refuses to fully explain. The beauty of the book of Genesis is not that it acts as a simple modern history textbook giving us sterile facts and figures. It is an ancient, deeply layered, and spiritually profound document designed to make us wrestle with the very nature of our existence, our relationship with the divine, and the consequences of our actions. The story of Cain's exile, the subtle differences in the creation accounts, the sudden appearance of his wife, and the building of Enoch's city. These are not mistakes or careless editing by ancient scribes. They are intentional mysteries left in the text, open loops that invite us to dig deeper, to ask harder questions, and to seek the vast, unending wisdom of the Creator. Was there another race of humans before Adam and Eve? Did a global population witness the exile of the first murderer? The Bible may not give us a definitive black and white answer, but it leaves the door wide open for us to wonder about the sheer scale of God's creation. It reminds us that His ways are higher than our ways, and that the history of our world might be vastly more complex, incredibly more populated, and deeply more mysterious than we could ever possibly imagine. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of the greatest mysteries of Genesis. If this journey through the ancient scriptures sparked your curiosity, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think Cain was so afraid of? Let us continue this fascinating conversation.